Before 1983, when the first genetically modified food was introduced, people have always eaten organic foods, foods that are grown by farmers and have no new DNA introduced to them. One example that we thought of was organic milk. It all began with the cows. A dairy milk cow begins her life as a calf, living in a barn and feeding off her mother's milk until she is old enough to eat grass, grain, hay, or silage. They spend 8 hours eating, 8 hours sleeping, and 8 hours chewing their cud. They eat 40 pounds of food and drink a bathtub of water a day. They start to produce milk at the age of 2 after they have had their first calf.
Then, in 1983, came along the GM foods. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, can be defined as organisms in which the genetic material, DNA, has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. GM foods are foods that have genes of other organisms.
The genetic modification process is when you take a gene from one organism and insert it into another to give it a specific trait. The health risks and long-term effects of GM foods are relatively unknown because the first transgenic food, an antibiotic-resistant tobacco plant, was introduced in 1983.
Did you know that even organic foods are not 100% organic? Whoa. The term organic is applied to non-genetically modified foods that are grown using natural fertilizers such as manure and limited pesticide use. The labels often also apply to meat reared without growth hormones or.
No matter how much you try to avoid eating GM foods, you will constantly be exposed to GMOs. Most foods on the market are genetically modified. 86% of corn, 93% of cottonseed oil, 93% of soybeans, 93% of canola, 95% of sugar beets are genetically modified.
So why GM foods? GM foods are developed and marketed because there is some perceived advantage either to the producer or consumer of these foods. Initial reason to develop was to protect crops from disease, droughts, and other things like these.
The advantages of GM foods. Ones we drew. GM foods grow faster than the foods that are grown in traditional manner. Due to this, productivity increases, providing the population with more food. GM foods are very helpful in places which experience frequent droughts or where the soil is not right for agriculture, due to which it is difficult to grow normal crops. Crops can be modified to be resistant to specific herbicides, making it much easier to control weeds. Apply the weed killer to a crop field, killing the unwanted plants and leaving the food crop unaffected. Some other advantages of GM foods are that they do not get rotten quickly. They taste a little better because of chemicals added, and they can be grown in places that are normally hard to grow crops in. Also, they can be modified to make them allergy-free.
Disadvantages. GM foods are new inventions, so not much is known about their long-term effects on human beings. It is possible that genes for resistant to insect pests, disease, and herbicides might spread to native plants and damage ecosystems. Pollen from genetically modified crops can also spread to fields containing non-GM crops. Supposedly, non-GM foods can actually contain material from GM crops. Some other disadvantages are that many people are also not comfortable with the idea of transferring animal genes into plants and vice versa. This cross-pollination method can cause damage to other organisms that thrive in the environment. GM foods can have harmful effects on the human body. They can cause the development of diseases which are immune to antibiotics, and people who consume such foods have high chances of developing cancer, and in many countries, manufacturers do not mention on the label that foods are genetically manufactured. They think that this would affect their business.
Are they safe, though? Different GM foods have different genes, so a general statement cannot be made. In the end, it is your decision, and we simply wish to inform you of genetically modified foods. Whether you buy it or not, it is up to you.